Greetings WordPressers, Jackson here once again. Welcome to the channel, nice to have you as always. So this one has been a little while in the making. I was first looking at this at the beginning of the year when it was a bit of a craze, the old Bento Box style. And at the time I was thinking, I wonder if you could do that Bento Box vibe with a query loop, you know, a post query loop block. And yeah, of course you can, but it does take a little bit of CSS until such times as the WordPress gods deliver us the CSS Grid capabilities we are only dreaming of. 6.6 apparently, but we'll see. Anyway, gotta say thanks to Ashish in the comments last week who put a request in for this. Kind of sparked my interest again in it, and I thought, well, let's get that one shoved up the schedule a little bit and finished up and released. So here we go. It's medium chunky, this one, but you learn a lot about cover blocks and you certainly learn about CSS Grid. Some top tricks there as well. Stay tuned for those all along the video. So here we go. It's the query loop of Bento Box. Okay, we are Bento a go-go. Here's a fresh install of WordPress and 2024 theme. Nothing much to see here. We've got a child theme, of course, to add our CSS to. Card up there. Link in the description to show you how to make one of your own, or you can just download it. Link is there as well. We've got some posts. Yes, we have. So let's take a look at what we're going to be making. Bentogrids.com. Very handy if you want some inspiration for a bit of Bento Grid action. There's hundreds and zillions of them. I've ended up sort of kind of going with this fella here. As you can see, it's fairly simple, you know, so obviously we're not going to stretch ourselves on this tutorial, but you will get the basis of what you'll need to do. So that's what we're making. The first step is to go to our pages, and let's get a new page in there, and let's call it, we don't need a pattern, thank you very much, Bento Box. In there, we're going to need a query loop, of course, because that's what this is all about. We're going to start from blank, choose image, date, and title, because we can use some of those, but we'll need to get this into some sort of shape. First up, on the query loop settings, we'll need the 6 boxes. So that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need 6 posts in our query loop. Let's get that wide width as well. And then we can move on to the post template. Oh, actually, we can get rid of pagination and no results. We're not going to need that for this. So we've got our 6 posts there. Happy days. Now on the post template that we brought in, we're going to need to, well, the featured image is going to go. And in its place, we are going to insert, we'll add one before, a cover block. And we're going to use the featured image of the post that's within the query loop. And then we can take our date and stick it into our cover, and our title and stick it into our cover, delete our paragraph, and we're kind of there. The cover needs a little bit of work, so let's get over to the styles tab of the cover and we'll change the overlay to something a bit darker. Maybe drop the opacity down a little bit. Great. And the text inside the cover block should be white, although the date is playing hardball, so we'll need to set that color individually. And we're going to wrap the content in a group, so select both of them using shift and then group those, and then we can control the block spacing here, so we'll just knock it all off so it feels a little bit more tight together. Also on the cover itself, we probably need to position the content a little better. And with the cover block, you get the content position option here, which we can set to bottom left, which is kind of nice. And because we got these grouped, we can now get onto our group, get busy with the padding. We're going to open up the custom version of that. We'll put a couple to the left, or maybe one to the left, and a couple on the bottom. So that feels a bit more like posty-ish. Anyway, let's copy that link and go to our front end and stick that in, and we do have our Bento Box starting point. Now let's get back to our admin, and on the page itself I think we should choose a different template, and for this it's going to be no title, so we get a bit more space to work with. Let's update that back to front end. Okay, cool. Now it doesn't really look much like a Bento Box as it stands, but we do have all the ingredients, if you like, for our delicious Bento Box. So what is next? Well, we need to turn this pretty straightforward list of posts into something that looks a little bit like our design that we've chosen. So let me introduce you to CSS Grid, where you probably know about a little bit about CSS Grid. And in actual fact, on our post template, which we have set currently to list view, we can change it to grid. And you see automatically we have a grid of posts, which is kind of cool. Doesn't look a lot like this one though. So let's see what we can do about that. So number one, with this approach to getting that intricate bento style, we are going to change the columns. See, we're on post template, and when you switch it to grid, you get another option on the settings here for how many columns you want. Believe it or not, we're going to set that to 1 column. Very important that, because we are going to use CSS to override pretty much all the grid settings. So let's update that. Back to our design. So we need a CSS grid that has got rows and columns. And looking at our design here, we do indeed have, well, I guess we have 1, 2, 3 columns, 1, 2, 3 rows. Very simple. Baby steps, ladies and gentlemen, baby steps. So how do we create that with CSS? Well, if you get into CSS Grid, which is vast, by the way, it's huge in its spec, there's a declaration called Grid Area. This isn't a tutorial about CSS Grid. This is a how to get it done type of vid. So let me introduce you to the mighty CSS Grid generator. Yes, indeed. I've been using this for donkey's years, maybe 3+4 years, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, pretty much since CSS Grid was around, there's been these generators, and this one is the one I've been using for years by Sarah, awesome developer. And what a tool like this will do is allow you to almost, well, not almost, actually draw in your grid children, the boxes within the grid, and then it gives you the CSS. Let me show you what I mean. We've got the bento grid here, which is the 3x3 as we defined. So we can now use this to replicate that. So we want 3 rows and 3 columns. We're going to put some row gaps of 20. And you can kind of see now already we've got this kind of mini template that we can use to now start drawing out our grid. So back to our design. So we've got, like, 2 high, 2 across, 1, 1, 2 across, 1, etc. So now let's just get that in. So you literally grab your cursor and start drawing out the different elements within your design, and you can see here we've got the layout pretty much designed. 2, 2, 1, 1, 2 across, 1. And then, thank you, Sarah, please may I have some code? Yes, you can. So copy that to the clipboard, and we'll get onto this the declarations and the parameters and stuff in a second. And we'll go over to our code editor where I've got the child theme here, and within the style.css, which we have enqueued properly for our block theme, cards up there if you need to know about that sort of stuff. In our style, let's just add that. Now, this is not a CSS Grid tutorial, but I'll give you a quick 10-second elevator pitch about grid. So the parent, essentially, our container, our whole container. We're saying I want columns of 3, 1 FR, 3 times 1 unit. FR is the grid units. Not a tutorial on grid. Anyway, and the same with rows. So a 3x3 grid. Happy days. That's the gap we put in. So we got gaps in between them all. That is the fairly straightforward part. The slightly more complex part is, what the heck is grid area? It's complete gobbledygook if you don't know what you're talking about. But grid area essentially is, it's for each element says, place this and put it in this position very quickly, because this is not a grid tutorial. Grid area is those 4 parameters are defined as grid row start, grid column start, grid row end, grid column end. Still means absolutely nothing. Let me try and explain this. So with grids, let's get back to our grid generator. With grid area, we're not dealing with the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 9 elements. We don't say, well, put it in element 9 or something. We're saying start at a certain point and finish at a certain point. Let me show you what I mean. So with rows go 1, 2, 3, 4. So with this syntax here, we are saying for this child element, start at row 1 and end at row 3. And that means start at 1, there's 2, there's 3. And with respect to the column, start at 1 and end at 2. There's 1, there's 2. If you don't know anything about this, I don't expect you to get it, but that's the sort of fundamentals of it. And by the way, you don't need to know with Sarah's amazing grid generator. Anyway, now we've got our CSS in. Let's just save that in VS Code, and on save it just breaks it all up into the different lines and formats it, etc. So the parent, which is the post template within our query loop. So let's go to our admin again, and here's our page once more, and there's our query loop, there's our post template. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a class to our post template and call it Bento loop. This is so that we can now add that to, copy that, we can add that, update that, we can add that to our CSS. If we go to the front end again, refresh our page, and we'll inspect anything, and we do a little search for our Bento loop, we can see there it is on that UL. The UL is the post template where we just added it, and you see underneath that UL we've got 6 lovely little list items that are our different child elements, the ones that we're going to make look like these shapes here with a bit of luck. Anyway, so let's get back to our CSS. So now we've got our parent. All we need to do is actually, remember we copied that Bento loop and we replaced the parent. Replace that parent class name with Bento loop. Now there is something important to know about when you're using grid and WordPress blocks. There's a lot of stuff built into WordPress core that deals with grids, and because we're not actually using WordPress core to create the grids, we've got to make sure that our specificity is correct. So we need to stick a few importance into our code here, which will ensure that these columns and rows will override what's coming out of WordPress core. So let's save that, go back to our front end and refresh, and we have almost like what we had with the previous 3 column grids. This is because we haven't specified anything for the children yet, but it knows that we want 3 columns and 3 rows, and because there's only 6 items, nothing fills up the 3rd row. So now we need to get the children to the party. So we know that these children are the list items here, and so we need to target those with some CSS, and specifically the nth child argument, along with using the Bento loop class to target the list item. So let's copy the Bento loop, let's put that in there, and then we can go lie, so the list items within the Bento loop, and we say nth child, and we say 1. That's going to target the list item number 1 within the Bento loop. Let's go grab that, copy that in to all our other children. You're coming to the party, children, and that's 3, and that's 4, that's 4, that's 5, and that is 6. Save that, and remember we've got to ensure we can override all our core WordPress CSS. So we're just going to drop in our important just belt and braces. That we are good. Let's save that. Now in theory, this should work. This should work. Let's refresh. Kind of. Look, we've got 1 there, 1 or 2 across there, 1 1, 2 across 1. A few little tweaks required, methinks. First up, let's get back to our cover. I think we need this a bit more bento, don't we? So let's do radius of 30. Also on the cover itself, we need to add a minimum height of 100%. Don't worry about this. This is not seeing the CSS yet. We'll come back to that. Save that. Back to our front end. Refresh. Hello. Oh, where's the border radius gone? Did we not add that? Radius 30. Update. Ooh, we're getting a bit bento-ish. Yes, we are. So the 100% thing essentially ensures that each cover fills its area. Do you remember that wasn't full height? So that sorts that issue out. But now it's feeling a little squidged. So if we add another class, if we look at this class here and just borrow a little bit, so we want to target all of the items. So we'll create a new rule. We'll put in Bento loop lie. So that's for all the items. And we'll put in a min height of, say, 300 px. Aha. So maybe Maybe a little smaller for our viewport, just so we keep things looking more bento-y. And that's cool. So let's get that into our CSS. Save that. Let's refresh that. We've got a bento box with a query loop. How cool is that? Right, well, you may have noticed that as nice as it already looks, there isn't any functionality with respect to it's just a view of some posts in a bento style. So let's get that sorted out. We need to make all these clickable and linkable. So we'll go back to our admin. Now we're going to give this a hard refresh so that all the CSS in the style.css comes through to the editor now. So hard refresh. Now you will notice something immediately wrong here. And I've got to be honest, this took me a little while to figure out when I was first working on this, a couple of months ago or something. That's not this. That doesn't look like this. So what it is that because this is a query loop, and within the query loop, within the editor, one of the items is kind of the template, if you like. It's this. Essentially, it's that. And I'm not going to go into it because it was a huge gotcha. Essentially, the editor puts in an extra list item that is the template. Like I said, don't make me explain it. And I'm sure that when Grid is introduced properly in WordPress, this will not be an issue. And hopefully in 6.6, when Grid is supposed to be coming, it will come for query loops as well. Come on. There's no fix for this. I mean, if you wanted to, tear apart the editor with some React, go for it. But there is a very easy fix for it whilst editing, and that is just simply click on one of the items that isn't the first one, and you actually get you can see here, you get the box, which means you can start working with one of the other items because it kind of thinks it's the template at that point. I know. And do all your business there. So anyway, that's the fix for that. So let's get back to our mission, which is to get a link to the post going on here. Now with the title, we can make it a link to the post. Yes, we can. Update that. Let's go to our front end, refresh. Yeah, we got a link to a post, but normally on these sort of featured grids and this type of display, the whole thing should be a link, which is pretty straightforward. If we inspect our link, there's a little CSS trick whereby you can expand the link area. I don't know how to explain it. Expand the link area to cover the entire area of its container. Shall I just I'll just show you. Right, so we're going to make a new rule and we're going to use our bento loop class. Let's borrow it from up there. Paste that in and it's A. And what we use is we use the pseudo element before. And we simply say that the pseudo element has a position of absolute. It has a width of 100% and a height of 100% and a top of 0 and a left of 0. And this is the cheeky part. We say that its content has just a space in it, and that way, look at my cursor, look, the whole thing is clickable. You see? Let's copy that rule, get that into our CSS. That's cool. I don't think we should have it highlighting as a text underline, so let's just copy our bento loop A, and there we can just add a hover to that, and that will be text decoration none. Refresh that, refresh front page. Okay, that's better. Click through. Yes, thanks very much. Back to our grid. So just to finish this up, I think the only last thing we really need to do is get some sort of indication on here that you're actually hovering on it. And that would be by, let's just get this baby up. That would be by changing the color of the overlay, which is this span area here. That's the actual overlay. If we just say display none on there, you see that the overlay's gone. And if we say opacity 1, that's the opacity. So we need to change the color of our overlay so we can target the span underneath the block cover. So let's get the block cover class and we'll add a new rule under the span. Let's get that span in there. So block cover, and when we hover over the block cover, then we want the span to change its background to red. Let's put a important in there. Ooh, hello. That looks like it's working. And I think something a little different. Maybe that. Yeah, groovy. So let's get that copied rule over to our CSS. Drop that in. And also you may notice that when you hover, it's on off, as it were. So we need to put a little transition to make this even slicker. So we take our cover and we take the hover off and we put the span on there just on its own, and we put transition, we'll make it 0.5 seconds. Save that. How does that work? Yeah, look at that. That's super slick. And I think that's it. Apart from, of course, let's go to responsive mode. And yeah, a little bit of work to do there. But again, super simple. Let's go to our Bento loop main container, and we'll add a new rule that would be display flex. Let's make that important. And flex direction column. That's our column sorted out. Now hold tight. Let's just go copy that into our CSS, and we'll get a little media query going on here. So at media max width, say 800 px. We'll put that in there, and you see that because we've got this height going on, let's see where that height's coming from. That is coming from our Bento loop lie, so we just change that to auto. Get that in our media query now. Let's see how that's looking with a refresh. That's cool. These could actually be the actual height of the cover itself. Because we've got that min height 100%, it's essentially doing its job. So let's add another rule for our block cover, and we'll do min height of say 300 px, which is a little bit nicer, wouldn't you say? So that's our media queries sorted out. I mean, you could get really funky with the, say with tablet view. Let's go have a look, if you see what I mean. Let's just refresh that and check that's working before we get funky. So that's our above 800. But here you could have some different sort of grid areas for mobile and stuff. Fill your boots with funkiness. But I reckon that's it. That's given us a Bento Box query loop with quite a few of the bells and whistles. And doesn't it look absolutely stonking? Yes, indeed. And if you'd like a little bit more block theming action, check out this masterclass on creating a single page website, start to finish, with block themes. But until next time, I shall see you later.